On. Good evening, Canby. Welcome to the Canby City Council work session this evening. Tonight is a continued conversation about the city administrator performance evaluation process and review. And so we're in the, starting the conversation of what we want success to look like this evening. And so as we've hammered out at the last meeting, the council was presented with three options for different forms to use, and the council decided to use option one, and it was to use the option one form to do, I guess, another evaluation of our city administrator.
Or to complete the one we started, really.
Or complete, where everyone was on the same page and using the same form. Okay, so that's what the option, the document that we have. We have our consultant that we've partnered with here, Sally, who is here to help us go beyond that, the option one performance evaluation form, to either enhance that form, leave it the same, and create an ongoing process for the council to be able to do an annual evaluation on our city administrator. That it's boilerplate, that it just continues moving forward. And so, Sally, I think what you have there in front of you, yes, there's a goals document piece, but also Councilor Patton created an outline of what one could look like in terms of a process as well. I think hopefully everyone's had a chance to kind of read through that. And then, Sally, we're hopefully going to rely on your wisdom and experience to help us streamline a process that is, I guess brings us to an easy finish to an annual evaluation for our city manager. So you have a question, Council President Hensley?
Well, kind of a question, kind of a proposal. I read through Councilor Patton's idea, and I think there is quite a bit of merit to this.
Okay.
But we've also already agreed upon option one format. So I had the mayor send me option one format in a digital format, and I'm trying to marry the two a little bit so that we can have a form that has, let me finish.
No, I know, I'm
that
getting
has,
line.
okay, that has your ideas in here, but I do have some questions on your ideas before I can actually fully finish my idea. Option one has some competencies that aren't included in yours, which I feel are important to keep in, the fiscal management being one, especially considering things that have come to light recently. I think that's something we should always keep a pulse on, so fiscal management should stay in there, in my opinion. But you do have a lot of good points here. My only confusion, well, not the only, but my biggest confusion on your idea, and if you could elaborate, if the mayor's willing to let you expound on your scoring process. That's a little confusing to me. So I wasn't able to incorporate that. So I'm in the process of trying to marry the two ideas, but I'm stuck on your scoring. So if you could elaborate on that, that would be helpful for me anyway.
So before I turn it over to you,
Okay.
I'm going to digress, well, because you had your hand up. I want to take a step back for a moment, and I want to pose the question. So we did a review process of Eileen, our city manager, back in November. Do we honestly need to redo? I mean, we gave her a ton of feedback. She's already been working on it. Is there going to be things that are going to be different that need to be added, or is there going to be different
I, for
feedback?
one, feel like we weren't complete. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that feels that way, but.
Okay. Yeah, yes, Mr. Davis?
Okay, stepping back, the last council meeting, we agreed upon option one as the form. The only thing I ask is that we make it a fillable form. I don't want to have to mess with saving it to Word or anything else. I'm sure we've got somebody at the city that can make it a fillable form when it comes to us.
I already did that.
Yeah, so, thank you.
I mean, I can send it to you, but I don't on my computer.
Okay.
Just hit a button on Adobe and it makes it all full.
Adobe, thank you. And so we've got the form. I'm not interested in adding or recreating something new at this point. You know, I would say that I'm more interested, I think that Councilor Patton has done a really good job with highlighting some things moving forward that we can use, but like everything else, we send it to our city attorney or to a professional, and we have the professional put it together so that we make sure it's legal and that it's currently something that they use in other cities or government or whatever, and that's why we have Sally, you know. So I would say we just talk about the points that Councilor Patton put in his proposal as far as how we move this forward, give it to Sally and let Sally bring something back to us.
Okay.
And the second point, no, we did not do an evaluation.
Okay. Any other, Councilor Waterman?
Yeah.
My
My
question
question
so
is
that we, I'll get to you here,
Oh,
Jason.
sorry. Good, Jason.
No, what I'm trying, so here's my frustration. I have no interest in touching option one. I have absolutely no interest in reinventing the wheel for what we're currently doing. My whole goal is to try and create a process for the future. So once we finish Eileen's review, whether we review her again or we don't review her again or review her 3 more times, I really don't care. My goal is to actually get the ball rolling on a permanent process of how goals will be set, of how goals will be implemented, about how goals will be tracked, and about how the end process will be evaluated. So that, I want to make that extremely clear. I would be happy to go over my thoughts and opinions about this document, but it sounds like people still want to talk about document option number 1. So what I would say is, when you all are finished arguing over this one, let me know, and I will be happy to go into more detail about what I proposed. Because what I had planned, what I had envisioned this process being was I would chat about this document. You folks would ask me some clarifying questions about it. We would then sort of as a group jot down what we would like to see in it or not in it, or changes or additions, and then those notes would go to, and I'm sorry, Sally. Sally would say, this works, that doesn't work, da-da-da. Then that information goes to our city attorney to say, this works, that doesn't work, and then it comes back to us for final review, and then bake it into our policies and operating guidelines. That is what I'm looking for.
So you're not looking to integrate these into the actual form. You want a separate policy and process for how the goals are set, how they're implemented, how it's tracked.
Moving forward.
Yeah, so that's why what I have here, this is kind of out of sequence, but I have like the process for city manager goals document. So this document that talks about, you know, achieve council goals, engage council and mayor, these are all fluid. So you can have any number of master goals, you can have any number of sub-goals underneath each master goal. That part is the different subsections and the different sub-goals are set out through the process of creating the next goals document. Then the goals scoring is overlaid over top of that. Then there is the section that talks about like how the goals are set, and then there's a section of a timeline of how the goals are monitored and reviewed. So when people are ready to discuss that part of it, I am happy to be a part of that.
So before, okay, and I think we're all kind of saying the same in terms of end goal, but before I come to you, Emily, will you show Sally her microphone and how to turn it on in case it's not on? There you go. That way, thank you. Thanks, Emily. Thank you, Sally. Okay, so what is your question, Council President?
It's not a question. I feel like maybe I've confused the issue when I said I'm trying to take Councilor Patton's document and incorporate it into option 1. My intention was not for this review. It was for the fact that it seemed like this board liked option 1 as a format, and I was just trying to marry the two to put your ideas into this kind of a format for the future. I wasn't trying to change this process for this review. And so I was just wanting to clarify with you, I mean, I already started the process. Mayor sent me the digital format of option 1 today, just a couple of hours ago, so I've only really had like an hour with this to play with it. But I noticed that there were some competencies in option 1, which are still very valid in my view. And your assessment of your little subcontext was really good. And so I put those bullet points in option 1 form. We'll have to call it something else eventually. But the point system and versus unsatisfactory needs improvement, needs expectation, the scoring is where I was a little gray, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on that so we could come up with a format that these people already liked and put your ideas into it for the future. I wasn't trying to change this process for her review right now. So if I confused the issue with that, I apologize. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on your scoring system.
Yes, Counselor Stearns.
Just because everybody else talked, I think I'll say my opinion. But first thing is, yeah, let's go do option 1 right now while we have it. But also, just wanted to point out, I don't like option 1, but I didn't like the other ones either. And the reason why is, for example, competency evaluation, there's like about 10 different things. And if I say meets expectations, which of the 10 things meet expectations and which of the 10 things don't. And so I don't like it for that reason.
You think it's too jam-packed?
Well, it's like represent the city with positive outlook, keeps commitments, but what if I think she does 1 but not 2, and then all of a sudden, it's like putting a whole bunch of things into one rating, and I don't know that that's useful. So that's one of the reasons why I don't like that. I'd much rather see a list. That's why I like Jason's idea, is let's see a list of concrete things that we can just both agree are important and agree whether or not she did them or not, And so we say, did she do this or not? And if she didn't do it, do we think it's important? So those are the 2 questions I ask for any goal. And I think as far as whether it's fiscal management, other kinds of things, those should be incorporated into the goals of the city. And the goals of the city is what I think maybe not the only one, but one of the major things that to judge the city administrator by is how much of the goals of the council are being implemented. But some of the goals of the council may be pie in the sky, which you might agree and say, yeah, we didn't get the casino here, but we'll not judge her against it for that reason, just as an example. So I just want to say that's my opinion. I don't like it, not because it's a bad format, but because there's 10 different things you're evaluating on with one evaluation, and I think that's impractical. And the other thing is, I think the whole point of the performance review is to provide specific things that we want Eileen to either stop doing or keep doing more. And when you have something really general, it just feels like you're just putting a score on it. And I don't think the purpose of it shouldn't be just to put a score, but to actually move the administration and the city forward in the direction we want. So I'll shut up because I could talk forever, but that's what I wanted to say before we go on.
And Paul, did you ever get your comment in that you had?
If we agreed that we're just going to do this and move forward on the current evaluation and start talking about the other thing, I don't have anything else to say.
Yeah, so the current document that we have in the front
For this time.
is for this time.
Right.
Going forward, we're looking at an ongoing process that is that piece. So we're all on that same page. Sally, are you tracking us okay?
Yep.
Okay, good, because I'm not, I'm just kidding. So back to your original question that you were asking of Councilor Patton is an explanation of the points
Yeah,
system.
I'm not real clear on his scoring example.
Okay.
I'm sure it will make sense when he talks to it, but reading it, it wasn't clear enough to try and incorporate it. And my allegiance to option 1 is just the fact that there were some competencies on there that I feel are important that weren't on here. So I think marrying the 2 is a good idea. But I really am interested in hearing about your scoring system because it may be better than meets expectations, needs improvement. So that's what I want to hear about.
Okay.
Expectations.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so.
The floor is yours, Counselor Patton.
So what I will say is I did not just fabricate this in like my sleep. So the process, the goals document that you see before you is something very similar to what my company currently uses. And they are the 6th largest chemical company in Japan. So it is a very sound process that is used for everybody at all levels of the organization, okay? So, but it did need to be modified because it's not part of the system, right? So that's where some things got a little weird. How the points are allocated and that rubric is something that I came up with. So essentially what happens is if there are things that you want to see, competencies as far as fiscal management or those sort of things, those can actually be baked into this goals, either as a master goal to say, enhance fiscal responsibility within the city, and then you would assign certain sub-goals below it. Because the goal is you want them to achieve a certain goal, but as Daniel was saying, and from what I've gotten from multiple conversations that we've had, is that we don't want things that are squishy. More so, we want something that is clear and measurable, that we can actually say this was achieved or this wasn't achieved. And similar to what Daniel was saying in that if the rating of one goal is based on completing all of the things, and then it's either a pass or a fail, and they miss one thing, then how do you really rate that? So that is where this document comes in. Every single goal is given a point total, weighted on how much you want it to be influential on the total, evaluation. And then each sub-goal is then given points. So in this scenario, and also I just want to let you know, the goals that I put down on here are just notes to say this is what it would sort of look like. These, I am not recommending that these be the actual goals. They're just things that we have talked about incorporating a goal, so I threw them in there as part of the explanation, essentially. All of that is super fluid, because what you would essentially do is at the beginning of the goal cycle, you would say, okay, are these goals the goals that we want to track the city administrator on, yes or no? Are there different ones? Do we want to shift them around? And then once that's decided, then you start to evaluate the sub-goals underneath each one. Now, where it gets a little interesting is because you always want to push, and this is part of what we consider a stretch goal. If you notice where it says distinction in each subcategory, it's complete all sub-goals, and what you would do is you would put an extra thing. It's like this, we want you to complete all these sub-goals, but this is another goal that we think is achievable, that's going to take a little more work and maybe push you that much further. And if you get that goal, then you get to the 100%. Otherwise, you are going to at least get something for completing all of the sub-goals. And then it goes down there from there.
So that goal would be something that's already been outlined? It's like, okay, we
Correct.
expect absolutely these 4 or 5 things, but if you do number 6 too.
Correct. So
Okay.
if you look on this sheet, if you look at interact with the community as 20 points, there's all of the sub-goals, attend Chamber of Commerce meetings, meet with key community stakeholders, attend and stuff. But then when you see where it says distinction, it says complete all sub-goals and attend all community engagement academy events. Because those are events that the community is going to, and we want to promote the city administrator interacting with the community. And that might not be a requirement, but that's something we'd like to see. So that is sort of that stretch goal. It would be different for each goals category, right? It's like let's pluck, fiscal responsibility. Maybe the stretch goal is, we know we have a 20, we want a 20 or 25% reserve. If we're able to increase the reserve by, let's say it's getting a little low, and say we really want the reserve to be at around 25 or 26%, and they achieve that, then they would get 100%, and all of the sub-goals, then they would get 100% for that category. Now, so does that explain that aspect of it?
I think I get that. I'm a little confused on why we're doing like different goal categories have 5 points, 5.8 points. I would like to see some uniformity in the point numbers, but.
Well, and that's why, and so what it comes down to is so in this scenario, we want to emphasize achieve council goals. So that's why it has 25 points. And where engage with the council and mayor, that's something that's a little more expected, so it has less points. So the number of points for the total goal is what's driving the emphasis of what we want to see improvement on, or we want to see a higher amount of achievement.
Okay.
So you can have, so let's say we're like, really, we want achieve council goals to be 30 points, then we would take, 5 points from engage with council. And then once you get your total points set up for that goal, then every sub-goal and the distinction goal would get an equal amount of points. It should. Now, in this scenario, I put in a scenario of, and this is now going to the goal scoring example. You will notice that in, let me see, 30 in goal C, it says 35 points. Each of the sub-goals have 5.8. Well, the problem is that to divide 35 by those sub-goals in the final one, it doesn't divide up evenly. So you've got to make the numbers work, right? So that's why there's 5.8 for all the sub-goals and only 5 points for the master goal. And essentially there would be a rounding where, if it's, you could either say the number won't be rounded if it ends up with a percentage, or it will be rounded up if it's 6 or higher and down if it's 5 and lower. That was something that would end up getting baked in. So ultimately, the reason you have to divide the points up for that category over all the sub-goals is because all of that data then goes into the total points in the final rubric, where it gets sorted into distinction being 100 to 90, successful 89 to 70. And mind you, those categories, all those numbers can change too, right? If you want, if even progressing, if you want distinction to be 95 to 100 points, that can be changed too. That's all stuff that can be hammered out in this process. But ultimately, by doing this, in this goals scoring example, you'll see that goal B was insufficient. And then there's a note that says, well, if that's the case, the next time around, if we want to see improvement in whatever that goal B is, then you would take more points. You'd put more points into that goal so that way there's an emphasis on improvement in that goals category and all of those sub-goals. And if you really wanted to get down to it, is you could, if you think when you're doing your goals, when you're doing the division of the points within a sub-goal, it doesn't have to be even. If there's a sub-goal that you think should be worth more points, then that can be determined too. But that would be all part of the process. So the whole point of this document is to make it as fluid as we can so that the council can really drive home what goals and improvement it wants to see, while providing a clear and attainable path and not hampering future councils from being stuck to some very rigid process. There's a tremendous amount of fluidity in the process of creating the goals and what they would be and what they look like, as well as how the points are divided up.
So as I'm looking at this, then, Councilor Patton, so at the end of the day, the total points possible is 100.
Correct.
And so we don't necessarily have, so the more goals that we add for.
And each category has less points allotted to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Which there are some categories I feel are missing. So my only beef, if you will, it's not even the right word probably, is the point scoring. And I would like whole points. Maybe we have one less sub-goals, we don't have 5.8 or something. I would like whole points. Just because it's less complicated and.
Well, and something like that could be achieved in like one of the sub-goals, or you either make them all a standard point and then you put more emphasis on the distinction goal, or you pick out one larger sub-goal and put more points in that. That is sort of the beauty of this document, is that it's very fluid. You can divide those points up however you want and emphasize whatever you want in the process.
Right, okay. Go ahead, I'm
Question.
still thinking.
So basically, all the sub-goals are either completed or not completed.
Correct.
And then you tally those up, and then your main goal will reflect that, whether if you don't meet all of the sub-goals, then you're obviously not going to have like 25 points on goal A. It might be 21.
Correct.
Okay.
And the distinction, the successful, the progressing, and the insufficient are a way to divide those up because just looking at the points doesn't really give you the spectrum of things. It kind of needs to be divided up. And that's where it sort of marries up with some of the other goals documents where we've used, where there's, exceeds expectations, so on and so forth. That's where that comes into play. That's how those 4 categories are done. And ultimately, if you didn't want 4 categories and you wanted a 5th category, we could put it in. That would just be part of this process of hammering it all out.
Go ahead, if there's someone else.
Counselor Stearns, go ahead.
I'm in the
So
queue.
I like it. The only thing that I'm thinking about is this was going to require probably at least 2 meetings for each, a year at least. One just a very long meeting, I think, to set up the goals, and another very long meeting to score. So that's one thing I think I can't think of any other way to do this in a short period of time.
So that is sort of explained when you get to the section about setting new goals, as far as goal setting and refinement. Essentially, it says the council will meet with the city administrator to identify the goals for the next evaluation period. This will be based on feedback from the previous review, as well as updated council goals, the updated council goals document. And then one of 2 steps are kind of what I envisioned based on what we've talked about in the past. Each option A, after the council identifies its preferred goals as a body, they work together to refine and then set those final goals. Or the council meets and creates a menu of goals that it wants to see, and then the city or the mayor and the council president then meet with the city administrator to refine and finalize what those goals would be, and then bring that final document back to the council to say, yes, we agree with your assessment and we move forward with this document, or we would like to see tweaks. So yes, there would be some back and forth. The first time if it was decided to do this sort of process, the first time going through it would take quite a bit of time. But once it's done, when it comes to like community engagement, a lot of those goals are going to be things that transfer over each year, because those are things that we want to see on a regular basis. It's those goals that we want to see improvement in and such that will really be the ones that need to get hammered out. Specifically, if there was a main goal about achieving council goals, that is something that would need to be adjusted annually, because those goals are either finished or not. But once the document is created, a lot of those goals are going to be ones that sub-goals are ones that we're going to want to see each year.
Okay. Council President Hensley, and then I'll come down to you, Councilor
I'm
Waterman.
trying to remember what my thought was, because he just said a lot that was like, no, this is good stuff, actually. I don't remember what my original thought was, but I am looking at the option 1 form, which, I remember what it was now. You have 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 categories. There were a couple in option 1 I really think should stay in as goal categories, or I don't know what we're going to call them. And I just kind of wanted to get the temperature of the colleagues here. We have community relations, we have city council relations, we have, the one that's not on this new document from Jason is fiscal management. And I really think that's important, especially in light of recent discoveries. I think we need to keep a pulse on fiscal management. Staff management, he has here. Engage with council mayors on here. The only other one that wasn't on his was intergovernmental relationships. So with the local, regional, state, and federal, well, we don't really engage with federal, so we could probably change that verbiage, but I think it's important to have them engaged with local and regional governments, the county and whatnot. So I just wanted to see if people agreed with that, and keeping those 2 categories and adding them, we would have to adjust the points and et cetera, but.
Well, and I'll just say this, that all sounds great. I think that's even putting the cart before the horse of what we do tonight. Because essentially, I'm just looking to see if we can agree on a process, and then what you were talking about, defining those goals and those categories would come in the next phase of it, as far as setting next year's goals. So the answer is, yeah, you could put all those in there. The document will accept those additions or subtractions.
Okay.
I have a thought, but Councilor Waterman, go ahead.
So back to the point of how the sub-goals are basically pass or fail, or completed or not completed. This is going to, number one, well, to me, it's kind of a good thing, but it's also going to be a challenge, I think, for us as well, is basically it takes the subjectivity out of it. Because you can't have a goal that says, manage the departments well. And then we try to subjectify what that looks like. The goals are going to have to be, departments had this metric and we hit this number type of thing. And it's either you hit it or you didn't. There's no one person thinks we did and one person thinks we didn't. It's got to be concrete. If it's a pass or fail, and somebody's being judged on that. So coming up with the goals, the sub-goals or criteria is going to be challenging, because we're going to have to get out of the mindset of community engagement is going to have to be you attend 3 events type of thing, and either you attended 3 events or you didn't. It's not, did they communicate with the community? And then we try to assume based on our perception of what that looks like. So it has to be very clear and defined goals on that.
Yeah, I like the
And
black and white better.
And that was my, as Tracy was asking her question, and that was going to be my comment, Paul, to that point, was how, because everything within Form 1, how do you put metrics, measurable pieces to, even going back to the conversation in November, some of us have regular meetings with Eileen. I meet with Eileen at least once a week, and then we have a number of conversations. Some of us don't meet with Eileen on a regular basis. Some have never met with Eileen. So how do you, so you have 7 different interpretations of more of a feeling than an actual measurable, great. Eileen has met with Paul. Paul and Eileen have set out, to have a meeting once a month, and she hit those. She meets, or what are those? And that's kind of where you're driving at, is what are those measurable, can we put numbers behind it?
Looking at Form 1, when we evaluate competency community relations, this would be a sub-goal that you would put in this that actually wouldn't work, is represents the city with a positive outlook. How do you gauge that? And actually, that's not a definable pass or fail, right? That's not a measurable, that item as a goal is not measurable. Is courteous at all times. Is that really, how do we know? What?
Courteous to me, but how?
Right.
Yeah.
So.
These are expectations. but,
Right,
yeah.
so it's different. What you see in here is completely different than how you would set up the goals and moving forward with this new new process.
And that is one of the reasons why that is one of the reasons why I kind of took this project on, is that for years, and this goes all the way back to when I was first on council in 2009 to 2011, there was no real clear defined process on how to do this. And so for X number of years, I've been watching this unfold. And so it was made very clear to me that we really need to, in my opinion, set up the process so there are clear and measurable goals, because we only interact with the city administrator at certain times. We aren't in this building all the time. So the squidgy, touchy-feely goals are really hard for us to judge on. So by having clear, set goals, that is why this is laid out the way that it is. And you're right, Paul, it is either a pass or fail. But now I would like to just touch on the like, let's say the timeline and setup for, and steps for review, okay? So part of the other thing that needs to happen with this is a partnership between the manager, and the managee, okay? So how it needs to happen is, and so what I am proposing, again, this is just the proposal, is that for a timeline.
Hold on, Jason.
Yeah.
Before we dive into that nitty gritty, I just needed, Sally, I just want to do a check with you on kind of, are you grasping all of this, and what are your thoughts
So far,
so
yeah.
far?
Well,
Eileen, you know these things too.
No,
No.
I'll get there.
I guess I have a couple questions. So maybe you already explained it, but I'm new to the conversation. Do the goals change every year, once or twice?
The city council goals,
Council goals,
they
Well,
change
a
each year.
little bit each year.
Are the goals that are described on here the same goals as the employee that you are evaluating? They become their goals, right? Okay, so the goals change each year for the employee, or maybe twice a year, depending on when you review them?
Just one.
Just the
Okay,
ones,
just
yeah.
once. And then, is there a policy, so this would be a new process?
Completely new.
Is there an existing process or a policy in place that you're modifying or that needs to be integrated?
We tend to do this differently each year, and that's why we're doing this right now, is to create a consistent process going forward.
Okay. And you already create goals each year for the council?
For the council, yes.
Yes.
And so to that point,
Main questions.
when we had sort of set Eileen's goals or the city administrator's goals last time, the council goals are a portion of it. But, you know, those aspects of interacting with the community, different community groups, are not part of the council goals, because that is something that we are doing.
And it's kind of mainstay. Those goals don't change year to year. It's just our goals and what she's going to do, or he, if in future
implement
years,
those goals or
that
support.
what they're going to do to implement those goals. That's the only
Correct.
part that changes.
And we have a number of goals that we set, and some of them are short-term goals and some of them are long-term goals. Some are ones that could be achieved feasibly within a year, some are not. And so how I envisioned and have laid this out was that the council would choose 3, 4, however many of those council goals that are achievable, that we feel are achievable within a year, and work that out with the city administrator to say, do you agree with us that these are achievable within a year? And they would become their own sections. So that way, all of the stuff that the city administrator is being reviewed on is not just tied to the city council goals, because there are a number of things that could impact those goals: financial, availability of land. There's a bunch of different things that could play into that. So the goal here is to create a process where if something becomes unachievable, it is either identified in one of the reviews, either the first quarter, second quarter, or third quarter review, and said, well, look, because of this crazy change, we now know that this goal is not going to be achievable. We need to recommend a modification, or we need to select a new goal that will be plugged into here so that we can still make sure that this is being accomplished.
Okay. Another question then. Are there any of these that some of them will just stay the same each year then? So for example, community relations with some objective criteria under it, would that probably stay, unless, let's say, there was a new group that you wanted outreach to, or something dissolved, but would that generally stay the same? And then the only new things would be new council goals? Or do you envision reconfiguring it each time? Is that making sense?
Yes.
We tend to be a contentious lot, and I have a feeling that for practical purposes, there will be revisions every year to this as we have different people on city council. Remember, we are politicians in this sense. We're going to be disagreeing on things, and this council will change. But I think it would be expected that some of the goals would be changing as the council changes. But I do like the idea of having the city administrator be on notice ahead of time and not just ambushed by a new, change, like I decide to want to go my bus route to Scotts Mills or whatever.
A contentious lot.
Yeah.
That's a good way to
So
put it.
my suspicion would be that maybe probably 50 to 60% of the goals from the previous year would probably transfer over into the next document. And then the other 50 to whatever percent would then either be goals that were last year's but need to be modified or honed in on or refined. And then the other ones would be new things. Because like with the council goals, if the city administrator does their job, then all 4 of those goals will be dealt with. They're done. And so then it's move on to the next set of goals. Personal development stuff, attending conferences or stuff, Eileen or the city administrator at the time is like, well, hey, I've got this new certificate that I want to get. That is something that might only be a 3-year thing. And so that would be in there at that point in time. So there would be some change, but effectively, a lot of like the stuff in the community, a lot of the fiscal stuff, much of that would probably remain the same, is my suspicion.
I suspect you're correct.
So, sorry, I'll let Sally continue to process.
I assume these are all taken out of the position description or the job description for the city manager, the evaluation.
So that document, I think you should just put that document away. That is not,
Well, it's the one we're using for
You
this.
currently have a position description that's somewhat similar with community relations.
Yes.
Fiscal
Yeah.
management,
Yes.
legislative outreach, or whatever it is.
Yes.
Okay. So are you envisioning that you take those criteria that you have built for the employee and then you build the goals underneath it? Or are you thinking of changing the position description?
That is a darn good question, Sally.
Okay.
I think the goals that are put into the document would align with the things that are in that position description.
I'm guessing that when you talk to your attorney, they'll say, does it link up with the position description? That's not for me, but I'm guessing that'll be something they'll say, well, you've got position description, build your goals around it probably, but, yeah.
Okay.
Or modify the PD.
Eileen, thoughts so far? This is very different than what we have done as a city, and I think in our conversations that probably you've ever experienced as well, as a city manager.
Yes, it is. I'm intrigued as I listen to it more because it takes the subjectivity out of it. And that is very interesting. So, rather than, you're right, on any given day, you don't see how I'm interacting with the staff, you don't see how I'm interacting with each of you. And so each of you has a different view of how well I'm doing. And so this does take the subjectivity out of the process a lot, and I'm very intrigued by that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Intrigued good or intrigued?
Intrigued in good.
Oh,
In a
okay.
good way, yeah.
Okay. So Jason, not to have you divulge too much, I guess, of your job performance, but I'm going to use, since this is an example that you brought from your company, can you, for the sake of the conversation, like in what you're dealing with and what your evaluation, divulge what you may or may not want
Mm-hmm.
to, but can you like walk me through or us through like, here was an example of goal A. And then
Yeah.
here were all the sub goals as part of that.
Yeah, so for
Just want to,
mine,
because it's different, because again, coming from retail and restaurant, I had the touchy-feely goals and things that I was measured on, but I also, part of my evaluation was how well did I meet customer service metric numbers, and how did I meet, gross margin, profit margins, cost of, all these, the key metric pieces that the company wants us as managers and area managers to focus on. So and I guess, do we want to meld those? And if we do, how do we do that? But first, I'm just trying to wrap my mind around like, how is it that it's been applied to you, and so that we can apply it?
yeah, so what I would say is how it's applied to me is none of these goals align with anything that I do. So like currently in the way my goals are set up through a similar process to this is I have 3 goals that are tied to financial. So it's finances of my sales within the territory, finances of my team's sales within our umbrella company, and then financials based on the overall performance of the larger umbrella company that I am under, okay? And so there's one of those that I really can control, and the other 2, I'm sort of at the will of whatever else is going on in other areas. So that is why those are all ranked. I think there's like maybe 10 points per thing, because there's only so much I can control there. And then the sub goals are based on numbers. It's like, did you hit your LBE? Did you get 90% of your LBE? Did you get 60% of your LBE? And then it's broken down from there. And then there's a stretch goal to say, well, your LBE is X. Did you increase your LBE by, did you get 110% of your LBE? And that's where you would get distinction. So and then there's a section about, safety. So we have a safety goals. And so I have several sub goals. Mine is different from other sales area managers in that I have a sub goal that we have a safety scorecard that is divided up similarly between distinction, so on and so forth. And one of my goals was to ensure that all the other sales reps on my team reached a distinction on their safety scorecards. So it behooved me to have quarterly meetings with all of my counterparts to ensure that they were doing those things, and then say, look, you need to send out these safety emails, you need to do these things, and then review their scorecards. And then there's one about, interacting with manufacturers, interacting with distributors, and then personal development. Doing special reports, like one of the ones I'm working on right now is we have a chemical plant growth regulator that's used on making more pine tree seeds, and it's not currently registered in Canada. So I'm doing a market analysis to see what possible sales are for that particular product in Canada, and then that needs to be submitted to go to the mucky mugs to decide whether they want to spend the $7,000 to get the registration or not. So that's sort of how my goals work into this. And then, as it is in here, every quarter I have a meeting with my manager, and we review how I'm tracking on my goals. Am I falling behind on one? Has something changed within the company, and now let's say a product isn't available anymore, so clearly I can't get judged on what the sales for that product are, so that one is then taken out of my goals, and then another one is put in its place that would be achievable within the remainder of time left within the goals period, but aligns with something similar. And so that's sort of the nice thing about this, is that you can make those, not only are you checking in on a regular basis to ensure that the goals are being achieved, and being able to make course corrections if necessary as you go, because oftentimes when these processes happen, everything seems to be going fine, and then all of a sudden you come to the review and it's like, well, wait, you didn't do this thing? Why didn't you do this thing? you're monitoring that as you go to ensure that there is success. And if there isn't success, then you need to figure out why. And now because you've been doing this every quarter, you've been reviewing it every quarter, there should be no surprises. And if there is a surprise, then there's clearly a problem. And that is something that needs to be addressed in the next period.
Yeah, that's a managerial problem. Okay. Any other questions or clarifications on kind of the scoring example?
Well, I'm still kind of
Sure.
massaging what I've been working on today.
Should we,
I'm just wondering, I'm trying to complete this and kind of create the actual scoring document from these ideas that Jason's brought us. But now that I think we've agreed that the fiscal management intergovernmental relations category should stay in, I'm just kind of wondering how we want to divide up the points.
Well, that's
Above
what I'm
the
saying.
categories?
Yeah,
Talking
so-
about dividing up points and creating the sub-goals and stuff is way ahead of where we're at.
yeah, I would
Okay.
rather us move
Okay.
into, I mean, I think there,
I'll finish what
So
I'm
here's-
doing and as far as I can get
I
it,
think
and then we can
based
work
on what
it.
Jason has just explained, the scoring piece, there's a lot of questions that we
I think
had
that's probably
had.
another meeting.
Right, to what
Yeah.
Tracy's talking about, or sorry, Council President Hensley, that I think is an additional meeting after
Okay.
maybe
Fair.
Sally digests some of this as well. And I think we as a group move into kind of like, what is what's an appropriate timeline process
Well, what,
for, which I know is in here as well.
well, yeah.
Sally, did you have something?
Well, just a couple thoughts. So the timeline, that seems like a really, a goal that you don't have anything about a timeline right now or process, right? So that's absolutely a standalone no matter how you do it, right? You don't have a system. And it sounds like you've never had one, or if you have, it's maybe loosely linked to annual evaluation, maybe your hire date. It's
Yeah.
usually how evals go, right? So, but something to think about is often these are built on position descriptions or job descriptions. So, and sometimes there's so many things that are required in a job description, it might be hard to build that many goals to evaluate with, to hit all the things in a job description. There's so many different things, just to be thinking about, is there a way to have your goals in your rating system, but still take into account the things that are in the job description? Can you really carve out only 5 things under financial, fiscal responsibility? Do you want to have something else in there? So maybe there's a way to merge it or something. Just thinking about it, it could be overwhelming for the number of goals for the job a city manager has. I mean, assuming this is roughly, just to throw it out of the mix, but let's say this is roughly what is in the job description. It's a lot. It might be a lot of goals, or you have to drop things out that the employee should be accountable for, so.
Well, I don't think you have to drop things out. What then it becomes is a lumping, right? So it's like, if it's a financial thing, rather than saying, we want to have a successful audit and a successful budget process, you might combine the audit and the budget process together, because those go hand in hand. So then you start to group those sub-goals together to get them down to a manageable number, while still aligning with the overarch. Because, I mean, there is information in the contract as far as what's required. To say, well, I don't think you can create goals, individual goals that will align with that, would then make me wonder, well, then if that's the case, then why is all that in the contract? If we can't quantify the job into clear and measurable goals, then what is the point of providing a requirement for the job?
Well, that was another one of my questions. I mean, so what's the purpose of the evaluation? I mean, there's performance management. So
Yep.
there's, is it not being done? And then there's feedback to the employee for self-improvement, and it's just public accountability. I mean, this is, public funds. So there's all these different competing criteria. And sometimes it's hard to hit all of them. So, yeah, I'll have a good answer. It's all of it. But it might be hard, yeah. You could consider trying it out, piloting part of it is one way to think about it too. You could try it and see, how does it actually work? When you actually try to measure some of these Do you feel like you're able to hit everything? That might be the way to start too.
For me, I think something is better than nothing, because that's what we've got right now. We have nothing. Every year we reinvent the wheel, and it makes no sense. One of the things that I try to do as a counselor is make things clear for people. And this is a process that has never been clear. And so that's why I'm throwing this out as an option.
Yeah.
I mean, other people are welcome to give it a stab. This is what I put together.
Yeah, I think people like goals. They like measurable goals, and people like to be able to evaluate people on clear
And
criteria. I mean, I think that's really positive for people. They like it. And it works.
And if I may just share a thought, is that obviously they have the jobs description, and the job description is fairly broad, basically run the whole city, which is, but what I envision, at least from talking this, is for the council to determine what aspects of the job are most important to us. So example, show up every work at 8 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, it probably happens every time, and we don't need to put a goal for that, or answer your phone calls, unless it becomes a problem, we would never include that. But we would look at the ones that say, hey, these are the things that we as a council, so we're not gonna have to, the goals won't have the ability to measure every single aspect of her job. I don't think it's possible. But and that's why I think limiting it to 3 or 4 goals per section is really important, because in one of the processes we as a council will go through is decide what is most important to us. And by saying what is most important to us, and then, collaborating with Eileen about what's most important, then we can focus on the things that we really need to focus on. And that might change, because after fulfilling a few goals, they may not be necessary. It may be part of the city culture. And then we would say, okay, what's the next step for the city to go in a different direction? So that I envision them not maybe all changing, but somewhat changing over the years. What are we focused on as the city grows and adapts to change? So I don't know that we need to cover all aspects of the job description, but I think just the ones as a council we think are the most important.
Here's another question. What if the employee didn't perform some part of their job? Would you then make that a goal? Or let's say there's a part that you didn't think you had to put in there because it was positive attitude at work and supports staff growth or something kind of squishy, but you have a lot of staff attrition or something. Would you then put a goal into it, put it into a goal, or would you just write in, hey, you're not supporting staff, you're disapproving requests for training, or, how would you address it?
I think, just just tell my comments.
It's just a hypothetical, but I'm thinking, what do you do if it's performance?
But the idea is
it's not in a goal?
if it becomes something that's a problem, we would make it a goal.
Okay.
And tell her as part of the review and say, hey, you know what, no one's shown up work for the last 2 weeks. But those should be very limited to, just giving absurd examples, but, but I think we would want to at the quarterly session say, okay, but really to introduce a new goal wouldn't be fair to her unless it was a really big problem. And we cited a really big problem. We'd say, okay, well, it wasn't part of your goals, but, no one showed up at work, in the city, so we're going to have to kind of add that in there. And so that would be something that we would want to probably ideally change on an annual basis, but possibly if a big enough emergency or a big enough need arose to change it more frequently than that, if there's a big need to rise. But I think that would have to be shown. There's a need arising that needs to be addressed, So, my thoughts.
So I guess the next thing I want to run down through here, so I kind of talked about the timeline. Now I want to dive into the final review steps. This is the one that I think is going to, I've tried to capture as much thoughts as we all have had over the last few months in talking about these things, as well as thoughts that I've had. So, and there's one in here which I think would be particularly sticky, because I love sometimes sticky things. That sounds really weird, I apologize. But that would take some serious review from legal to see how or if that would even be possible. So I'm just preparing you for that landmine ahead. So as far as the final review steps would go, the city administrator would prepare their self-evaluation. This would include details and documentation showing achievement of the various goals, journals of attending meetings or public events and those sort of things. It would be a mix of all of the monthly reports that we have been getting, and they would prepare essentially their end review. That's what I do. I go through and I say, I've achieved my financials, I've done the safety craziness, so on and so forth. They then provide that to the council. This is the one that I think is going to be sticky. The council and the mayor will interview the department heads and any other key staff member of the city as a body. Each director and key staff member will be interviewed separately from the other interviewees. This will allow each interviewee a level of comfort against peer pressure. Also, with the entire council and mayor present for each interview, it will ensure everyone is getting the same feedback at the same time. The questions posed should be focused on the goals that pertain to them. That being said, there should also be an opportunity for the interviewees to share their general thoughts on the city administrator's performance from their perspective. It is important for council and the mayor to take the temperature of the city's inner workings, but it is harder to quantify this as a goal, okay? Then,
Wait, hold on.
yes.
I think that's an important paragraph to talk about.
Well, what I would like to do is go through all of the different steps, and then we can go back and talk about one, because I don't want to get, the whole goal of this is to check off the ones that aren't controversial, to say we got those, and then we can spend time on the controversial ones, but not lose sight of the whole process. So, members of the council will prepare their own notes regarding the achievement of the various sub-goals. They will use the self-evaluation information provided by the city manager and the information provided in the staff interviews. They should also have firsthand information provided through the year in the form of regular reports, their own participation in city events, and engagement with members of the community. The council and mayor will meet to compare notes and discuss the performance evaluation. This will also be the time to identify if additional or clarifying information is needed. The city administrator will meet with the council and mayor for final feedback and to finalize the review. Any recommendations for compensation adjustment, corrective action, or termination will be made and finalized at the final meeting. All notes and documentation will be collected to be added to the employee file along with the consolidated review document. Note, an area that needs improvement is ensuring the final documentation of the review is submitted to HR and the city administrator's employee file. Special attention needs to be paid to developing the process of finalizing the documents so they may be signed off on during the final meeting and submitted for record keeping. There has been a history of this information not being provided in a timely manner to HR. By building that step into the final meeting, it may help correct this particular problem. So that is what the interview, that would be what the process would kind of look like based on what I have here. Now, go.
Council President Hensley, your hand is up first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been thinking about this since the last meeting, actually, when Councilor Stearns brought up the fact that not everyone on this board gets the same information from staff. And so I was thinking about that, and while I feel like our 360 interview feedback was helpful, I think that having that feedback from the directors come to the entire council would be more helpful, so that all the counselors hear the same things. It's not distilled down, filtered in any way. They just hear the raw material. I think that would be more beneficial.
Okay.
Councilor Stearns is nodding.
I
Councilor
agree.
Bottom's nodding.
One of the criteria that's always puzzled me about this job is about the city administrator, on how well she runs the city internally, and there's really no, at this point, there's absolutely no metric for me to measure that by, other than rumor and
conjecture and
Well,
speculation.
with that, we also deal with something called information bias. So generally in speaking, in a large organization, the ones who are dissatisfied will make their voices known. The ones who are satisfied won't, as a general rule. And so to interview all the directors or whoever we think are important, to identify, we can work past that later, would be a very important step for me. Otherwise, I just have to say, I don't know, is everybody happy or not, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think everybody having the same information at the same time would be helpful.
So, Councilor Waterman, sorry.
Oh,
No, go ahead.
okay. So if we're going to go that route, I agree with this process. I think one of the problems that we've always had is where is that line and, you know, as far as the charter and how legal is that, et cetera. So we'll have to figure that out. But if we're going to have the information, I'd rather us all have it. Second thing is back to the beginning part about pass, fail on goals, et cetera. Now, just the challenge is we have this information, what do we do with it? How do you actually apply this type of information now to the process of what we put in place of goals that are pass and fail? And how are we going to incorporate that feedback into this review process?
So to that point, the questions that are being asked of city staff essentially need to be born from the goals document. If the goal is that the city administrator is meeting with department directors X number of times or whatever, then the question is, department chair, has the city administrator had these meetings with you? And those primary questions are going to be born out of this. Now, to your point, there's always going to need to be a bit of squishiness. Now, you can tailor, whether it's in personal development or whatever, you can tailor something to that might a goal that might be more tied to, you know, how do people feel. Regardless of whether that is baked into a goal or not, that is always going to be on our minds. And it will always, unfortunately, cloud how we interpret and all of this. So essentially, this, in my opinion, some of that more squishy stuff is still going to get encapsulated in this. It's just not going to be a specific goal. Like, if we go through these interviews and, you know, there's something that comes out that's glaring from every single individual, then we're going to know that maybe we need to dive into something further. And that would create a different process.
Kind of following up with how Mayor Hudson brought up with how this is done with you, you manage other staff, right?
I do not manage other staff.
Okay.
At this point in time. I am managed by many people, so.
Okay, so you don't have a process where
It takes
you're
many to manage him.
graded on how you interact with other people, per se, like under you?
Not staff, but I am graded on how I interact with distributor reps and distributors and manufacturers and stuff. And then through my reports and through my manager traveling with me and those sort of things, seeing them at trade shows, they get a temperature as to whether
Yeah.
I'm showing up or not.
That's still a little bit different than a personal direct report type of relationship.
Correct, yes.
All right.
So, just a sidebar question. So, Councilor Waterman, you worked for the city of Canby. You now work for the city of Wilsonville. Have you been in either position long enough to receive an annual review? Is my first question. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Is that evaluation, performance evaluation, tied to your job description?
Probably 60 to 75% of it.
Okay. And are there metrics that you are held accountable for, or is it we'll call them the soft skill stuff?
Most of it is this option one.
Okay.
It's basically the same thing, just in an online, like a web type form.
Sure.
And then usually honestly, the only goals are literally in the review, you'll go through all this, and then at the end, you'll have like personal goals and department goals, and you'll have 3 or 4 of these specific things. And so basically, this whole process of this new process is a tiny part of the overall process, and the current ones that we have done, I have done before currently, so.
Thank you for that, I appreciate it. Here's my concern on, and this is jumping in the Wayback Machine. When we did the one-on-ones, because so myself and the council president at the time, we did do those very much how Council President Hensley and I just did them back in late October and into November. I believe, and this might be something, Sally, for you or for our attorney, there are certain labor law pieces to that I'm not totally solid on, that we would have to get figured out. If it's all of us, and how is that going to look and work? Because I believe some of that, depending on how it's captured in terms of notes and things, do need to be turned over and become part of the employee's file, if I remember correctly. Sally, is that ringing a bell to you?
About what goes in the employee file?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a statute about what's a personnel file, so it isn't just what you put in it, it's a definition. So it doesn't matter if the HR manager sticks it in there or not, it's considered part of the file, but I don't, off the top of my head, remember all those documents.
Sure,
But
okay.
and people have a right to it. Just one more thing to be thinking about is maybe we're getting caught up in the term goals versus like criteria for how you measure job performance. And so maybe if we start thinking about objective criteria or criteria for how you measure job performance, and then goals that are set each year that might change too. So maybe you have some that are always objective criteria that you always want to measure, that are objective and easily measured, and then some goals that also change, but they're all measurable, but maybe that's another way to think about it too. I know I'm getting kind of caught up in goals, but really it's always the goal to meet those criteria. So that might be one.
So perhaps the council goals are the goals, but the other things we talk about, the community relations, the staff relations, those would be objective criteria.
Maybe, but they're still measurable. It's just kind of the word you use.
But we just don't use the word
you could say, these are
goal about
goals
that.
for 2026. How are you going to help us implement them? And then you work on them together, and then you have measurable marks on each of it. That might be
Okay.
something to think about.
So
It's just a thought.
nomenclature, okay.
So
The other, go ahead, Councilor Stern.
before we leave the subject, or we were talking earlier about interviewing the directors and such, I did have a conversation with Emily in the parking lot about this subject, and she said that it wasn't permissible to do that in an executive session, which of course was what I highly recommended for getting directors, that it wouldn't be in a public session. And she said that was legal because to evaluate
Because it's part of a
evaluation
evaluation
of
of a employee, yeah.
so that just, I don't know if that's gonna, the lawyers may have more to say about it, but that, at least it was my understanding that it was feasible in some way or the other.
Any other comments on the city staff piece? No, okay. I'm going to jump to the first piece about the process timeline. I guess, how do we best align it with the city administrator's contract? So in the case of like Eileen, she started in November, fiscal year doesn't begin till July. How do we bridge that gap, or what does that look like?
I'm fine with
Rough.
just leaving it in line with the contract myself, but.
Okay. Counselor Patton, your hand is up.
Personally, I think it should be aligned with, the fiscal year. Because our goals, because the problem that we face is wherever the city administrator starts in the process, it could be in the middle of goal setting, right? So then maybe half of their goal, the half of their year, is going to be based on one set of goals, and then we're going to change some of those goals, and then have to go back in and modify the document. To me, it would make more sense, and this is sort of like the click in the system, is that it might need to, the way I envision it is that there is an agreement with Eileen, if this process goes forward, to say, look, we want to make sure that we are evaluating you on a full year of both financial and goals, like, document. So, you know, would you have a problem, or what would it look like for us to realign that? You know, have a half-year thing, but now get you on this track, and then when future city administrators are hired, it is written in the contract that their evaluations are done on like a fiscal year basis, so that way they know going in that that's how that works. Because to me, it adds a bunch of mud to the water to say, well, half of your goal or 2 months of your thing is gonna be big. We're gonna do this thing, and essentially we're gonna have to do a lot of rewrite of it in 3 months, because now we're into a new fiscal year.
Okay. Council President Hensley?
I get what he's saying, and I think we can work with it, but are we proposing then that we change when we do our goal setting? Because we do that at the beginning of the year, the calendar year. So what are we doing? If we're going to evaluate her or him on a fiscal year, then we need to move our goal setting to align with that as well, because we do that at the beginning of the
But
calendar.
aren't our goals on the fiscal year? I mean, we create them in the beginning of the year,
They don't go into
but they don't go into effect. So whatever we did in February, we're gonna approve it like maybe next meeting or the meeting after. And then that's gonna be the goal for July through,
Is that how we view that?
I mean, that's my understanding of it.
Well, I would just say that the goals are also tied into the budget process. So the budget process has to be done in time for the beginning of the fiscal year. So typically, goals are set, budget is developed to achieve those goals. And so there is a relationship between the timing of goal-setting session and the budget.
What we're doing in January through May is for the following year. So the goals that we're setting, we're going to be reviewing January, or the goals that we're doing now will start in July of 25, and we'll be reviewing those goals in June, July, August of 26.
Yeah, it gets a little complicated because understandably, the council wants to get going. And so there's always like, what are we finishing and what are we starting? And so that this last quarter, from March to June kind of gets a little squishy.
Some of the goals that we talked about in January may actually start in March
Exactly.
instead of falling in July. I mean, it would still follow, it would still be,
I think that,
you just got a head start.
I think the evaluation should be based on I think as well, I mean, I don't know if it's a problem with contractor Arlene or whatever, but I think it would just be at a degree of consistency to do it based on the fiscal year, because that's just the way we do everything else, so that just makes it so we're saying, and we as a policy, we say the goals like we did right now are for July through June of next year, but if you get them done this year, we're still happy.
So I'm going to pick on Counselor Davis for a second, having just come out of the fire district. How was your annual evaluation done on anniversary date, or was it around fiscal year? I'm just trying to get a barometer check, nothing.
Fiscal year.
It was fiscal year, okay.
Yes, this is much different. Having this discussion as a city council is much different than what I'm used to.
Sure.
In the fact that we had HR Solutions, a company, come in, and they did a goal setting and a personal evaluation class, not only for the board of the elected fire board, but they also did it for all of the supervisors. And the supervisors then met with the firefighters. So everybody's performance evaluation was based on SMART goals. And the board would set my goals for me, and essentially, if they were measurable, and if anything changed, I gave that report to the fire board that it's not achievable anymore. Okay, so in other words, an example would be, they said, our ISO rating is Class 6, we'd like to see that lowered, okay, because it affects how insurance rates within the city and the fire district. We'd like that done in the next year. Okay, so that was a very clear goal for me on what the expectations were and how we were going to achieve that, but affected our fire marshal, our training officer, and everybody else down along the way for us to come together on that one goal. Okay, and if something changed, timelines or whatever, I reported that to the fire board that we're going to need to move that target date. So then it became communications. In other words, the communications between myself and the fire board. And so there were no surprises. Now, in regards to other type of issues, if you didn't like the way somebody dressed, or you felt like they were ineffective at meetings and things like that, you just sat down with them and said, hey, look, this has come to my attention. So there's no surprises.
Sure.
You don't wait until the end of the evaluation to then hit them with all this laundry list of small things that could have been corrected along the way. You know, so you don't want that to be a surprise to anybody. So then, and then the evaluation, the performance self-appraisal would go out in front of the evaluation, and all the employees, including myself, could list areas of strengths and improvements, and then set goals, whether it's professional goals, career goals, and what you hope to achieve this next year. And then you sat down together and you agreed upon those goals. In other words, those goals were set collaboratively between the employee and the supervisor. And then the supervisor and the employee would sit down quarterly and just go over those goals. How are we doing? You know, so there's no surprises along the way. And everybody was trained the same way, you know, and it worked very effectively. In regards to sitting down with the department heads, I think that I'm not in favor of that because of the fact that we will know it if there's issues, right? Because the goals aren't being accomplished. There's a chain of command, and that's what I've been used to as far as a chain of command is concerned. And to me, that then that puts that supervisor, the city administrator, in a position of worrying too much about keeping everybody happy so that when they come and talk to the city council, you know, everybody's happy, right? Well, they're not always going to be happy if you're doing your job. You know, so frankly.
Spoken like a true director there,
Yeah,
Jim.
so I'm not interested in interviewing the department heads because if the goals are being accomplished effectively, if they're not being accomplished, number one, we're going to know about it. And that to me is the bottom line. Are the goals being accomplished? You know, and so, you know, that's why this is different for me, listening to this, because I'm used to, you know, SMART goals and everybody being trained the same way throughout the organization, including the fire chief, the assistant chiefs, the deputy chiefs, you know, along the way. And I really don't like violating the chain of command, you know, because if they have an issue with the city administrator, then they can request through the city administrator the ability to come and talk to the mayor and council president, if that's the case, you know, at that point. But that's just the chain of command, you know, and I'm used to that.
So I agree with you, Jim. I'm assuming that the fire board didn't interview your reports about you.
No,
Okay, right.
no.
So I will just say, the reason this point is in here is because historically, there has been an interview of the department chairs, correct me if I'm wrong.
Nope, as long as I've been mayor, we've done
Through this
that.
process, and that there has been, and this is me included, there has been some concern as to how that the lens or lenses that information is being put through. And whether those, because it is very clear in our charter that we really aren't supposed to be interacting with city staff on a regular basis, that for me, if we didn't interview directors and stuff, I could go either way. But I think that if that interview is done, it needs to be done so every member of council is getting the same exact information at the same exact time, that the questions are consistent for each person, and that it is very clear that it's very clear that this is how this communication is going. That this is our time to hear from you, not you haranguing us in the grocery store or calling us up to tell us various things. This is the process. And that, to me, that is why this is in here. Again, it's one of these things that if the group decides they don't want it or modify it or whatever, the world is your oyster.
Eileen,
I just wanted to comment that we too have a system here. It's called NeoGov. It does regulate, or it does have a standard form. Employees are evaluated on their anniversary date, so it's all around the year. And I encourage employees, to make sure that the feedback that they have for their staff, that they're not hearing it that first time, in that evaluation, that they are meeting regularly and talking and having check-ins and all of that stuff. So it does have standard competencies in it. It has about 6 or 7 competencies in it. And then it has a place that you can indicate the goals that you set for the employees. And so what I have been struggling with as it relates to department directors, going back to this process that I'm used to, where the council sets goals, you set the budget, and then you establish, then I'm typically used to setting performance evaluations, in that summertime for the department director, so that their goals directly relate to the council goals that were set earlier in the year. I'm having a little bit of a time justifying how, having to wait, if you will, to enter those goals into the NeoGov system if the person doesn't have, if they're set to have an evaluation, 6 months later. So I'm trying to figure out, how do I take the goals that were set by the city council and then work those into expectations sooner than the system allows me to. So it's more of a verbal conversation that I have with them.
yes, Counselor Stearns.
It's kind of a question for Jim, is that, I see your point about, put the mic on. I see your point about having, if the administrator is judged on the directors, then the administrator's job is to make sure the directors are happy rather than productive. I do see that, and it's a good point. But if the employee complains to the mayor or the council, because we get emails from employees that complain about the manager, about you, Eileen, about the emails that we've seen. How do you see our role as a council in addressing complaints? Or how because obviously all these option one has things in there about how well does the city managed. How do you know how well the city is managed? I mean, you can say just the goals themselves, which I guess is fine, but if somebody wants to try to make a complaint about how the city's run, I mean, how do you vision any, I struggle with this, I've talked to Eileen about this, talked to several counselors about this, what is what we as a role have to do. I mean, obviously, my own opinion is that I think we should let Eileen run the city, judge her based on the goals, but also, I can also imagine a scenario where things were going so bad that I might want to hear about it. And so so that's kind of a,
So how did that work?
it's a paradox, yeah. I mean, yeah, you want, you don't want to hear, I don't want to hear about employee complaints.
Yeah.
But if there's something really bad happened, I kind of do.
If a firefighter went directly to your fire board and said something, how would they have handled it?
They would listen to it, and then they would come and talk to me about it. And to say that never happened is unrealistic, because especially somebody that is being required to do their job and they don't like it,
What?
And
I'm gonna do my job and like it?
yeah. And, but the other part too, for city councilors, to me anyway, is the fact that we will hear about it from the public if they're unhappy. We will hear about it, whether it's public comment or whatever. And I'm used to listening and then pick up the phone, talk to the city administrator and say, hey, this is what I've heard, just so you're aware of it, but our city, the citizens have the ability to come under public comment or to talk to us individually. We owe it to the city administrator to bring those to her attention.
Sure.
And so, and I have brought some things to Eileen and she's dealt with them and followed through on them. To me, we just have to have an agreed upon process in regards to how we handle that, and without violating that chain of command. Now, as far as the citizens are concerned, or at the fire district, for instance, if we had a rogue fire inspector out there, if we had a fire inspector out there upsetting our businesses, I would hear about it. I may hear about it.
I don't know what you're talking about,
Yeah.
Jim. That's never
And
happened in Canby.
So
You guys handled that really well, I just want to
Thank
say
you.
that. I just say it was really well handled, I was
Yeah.
surprised.
But it's good to know because that's good feedback, and it's good feedback for that fire inspector too, that that's not how we operate in Canby. That's not the expectation of the department, and it was taken care of,
So it sounds like something that should be maybe outlined in the council policies and goals piece that we've got coming our way, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I agree with the
Because
whole piece about taking.
I'm happy not interviewing the directors, but I'm not happy with one member of the council interviewing the directors and me having to make a judgment based on somebody's opinion about what somebody else said. So that's my problem. I wouldn't mind not interviewing the directors, but if they're interviewed, I want to be there, especially if I'm going to judge them based on the results of that interview.
Yeah. Well, again, I think the city administrator is going to hear about it first. And then it's up to the city administrator to let us know, that we've got this employee group that's unhappy about this, whatever it might be, and this is why,
Or
so-
not let you know if it's a pending personnel investigation.
Yeah, not a personnel investigation, absolutely not. So, but I do appreciate, listening and seeing what Jason has put together. I think a lot of it has really good merit too, but I think as a council, we have to come together in regards to how we're going to operate too, moving forward too, because I can tell you, we open up Pandora's box to all the department heads, coming and talking to the city council. I think it makes somewhat the city administrator ineffective because of we're setting goals. Now, all those council goals, it's unrealistic to think they're going to be achieved in 1 year, right? But I think through the performance evaluation, if we have set these 4 goals that we really want to see accomplished, and if it's unachievable because something changed, we just have to know about it. we just have to be told about it.
I think that's where those quarterly check-ins would come in.
Yeah, and the key with the quarterly check-ins is not only, rather than having us as a body each do those quarterly check-ins, it's empowering the mayor and the council president to do those, but still come back to us with a report on how things are tracking. Because if there's changes to be made, the whole body is the one that needs to verify those changes.
And the reality is, all of us can schedule meetings with Eileen at any time to get our own updates as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess to that point, and I would recommend to the mayor to maybe take a straw poll to see if a majority of council agrees that we should be interviewing department chairs or if we should not.
So I have been doing that as we've been discussing, and I'd
Okay.
love to know Council President Hensley's thoughts on the matter, and I will tell you what the straw poll says.
Fantastic.
I think it's very important to get feedback because we aren't involved in the day-to-day and they are. I think it's important to get their take on how they view the organization running, the management style, et cetera. I think it's been valuable information, so I absolutely think we should get their opinions to take into account.
And Jason, you are, depending on how the wind blows.
I'm game for whatever. My opinion is that if the decision is made to do the interviews, it has to be done as a group.
And I would agree with that.
If the interviews are not done, then I am not going to lose sleep over it.
Okay. Well, so with, and Daniel, you're still of the mindset that, yeah, it should be council interviewing department heads?
If it happens, I want the council to interview it. Or if there's ever an issue where the council meets in executive session because of something an employee said, that employee has to be in there so we can hear what it says. I'm just not comfortable with making a decision based on hearsay.
Okay, so let me pose a question this way, you two squishy ones. If it's decided that the council wants to do the department heads, where do you lie? Do you want the department heads to be interviewed, yes or no? By everyone.
Wait, what?
Do you?
Do you want that information, yes or no?
Yes, would you want to do interviews?
Do I think that we should be interviewing department heads on the performance of the city administrator?
That is my question.
On their experience with the administrator?
My answer would be in line with the charter and, let me think about this. We do have the ability, it is in the charter for us to be able to interact with them. And so I would say in order to be consistent with the charter, I would say that we would need to we should interview the department chairs.
Okay. Daniel, same question, to move out of the squishy. Well, if everyone does it, then we should all do it or not? Do you, is your desire to be, that be a piece?
You know, I know it's dangerous, and like Jim says, but I can't think of any other way to have a informed opinion on the way the city's being managed. Otherwise, any other thing is going to be result from the squeaky wheel squeaking, but getting the sampling bias of the squeaky people running the show, because the squeaky people are the ones talking, and they'll talk whether or not we, whether or not we let them talk in the council, or if they talk to us, other places are going to talk, the squeaky ones will. And like I said, yeah, there is that danger, like you said, I appreciate that, of the directors being just told to tell us what we want to hear. But I don't know. I think I lean, but not strongly towards interviewing the directors, because I think it's already being done, and my only dissatisfaction is that you're doing it, not that I don't like you, it's just that I get a filter, and I'd rather not look at it through a filter.
Okay. Paul, you're of a no to the department head piece? Or a yes?
I'm just gonna, I would have to say no. I just haven't seen that type of management style actually work and be productive. So I think it causes too much inconsistency in the authority of management.
Yes, sir.
Mayor, I would like the city administrator's opinion on this.
Okay.
I agree with you, Jim. I think that, following the chain of command, that you can certainly listen to them, but pointing it back to the city administrator instead of having, I'm trying to visualize how this would even happen, and I think you should get an opinion from your city attorney about it as well. But I'm just trying to envision how this would even happen, if you would parade them all in here for a series of executive sessions, or exactly, how it would work. So I think that you already have the process in place, that people can come and they can express their point of view, and you would point them right back to the city administrator for working it out. I'm concerned about this being kind of a free-for-all, if you will, of it opens up the possibility that any complaint on any matter that might come up, and like I said, I might be holding somebody accountable for, performance improvement, but they decide that they're gonna feel aggrieved, and they know that they have this channel to the city council, and it's gonna happen over and over and over again. And I just don't know how you control that.
Councilor Patton?
I guess for me, what I will say is that this interview is not happening over and over and over again. It's happening it would be happening once a year at the very end. And any questions that are being posed to those staff members would be born from the section about, is the city administrator having their regular meetings with you? In the goals, it was to say you need to be given the opportunity to for personal development. Were you provided that opportunity? What opportunities were you provided with? There would need to be some, for me, what I'm trying to do is strike a balance, because the staff is, and this kind of is in line with Jim, and I think this is where this sort of divides into two different processes. One is those staff members are coming, and also with Daniel, those staff members are coming to us, and we are all getting different chunks of information. My goal is to provide them not only a clear path to say, this is when you provide that opportunity to us, this is when you provide that information to us. And if you start to say, well, the city administrator told me that I can't have my desk painted orange, and I think that's ridiculous, be like, well, the color of your desk is not one of our questions today, so you're gonna have to take that up with the city administrator. But did they have their regular one-on-one meetings with you? And if the answer is yes, then great. If the answer is no, but in your notes it says yes, now we have to figure out where the discrepancy is. And then so that is sort of like that avenue of this process. So it's not all the time, it's not once a quarter, it is just during the final review. Then to Daniel and Jim's point, creating that process to say, if a city councilor receives a complaint from a city staff member or something along those lines, this is what happens. They tell the staff member, you need to do this process, and then we kick it back out. Ultimately, the answer to that process is kick it back. It's not us go and talk to so-and-so, us deal with this thing. The answer is we listen to what they have to say. We say, I hear what you're saying. There is a clear process on how this is supposed to be addressed. Now go through this process, and then we revert it back to the process. That is really, the process would be 3 steps. 1, city staff member tells you that they are unhappy, and this is why. 2, you say, I'm sorry that you feel that way. The city charter says blah, blah, blah. I've heard what you had to say. Step 3, you need to go through the process, whether it is what you have designated as city process or through collective bargaining. End. And then if it's like, well, I want to do the da-da-da, back through the process.
Counselor Stearns.
Be addressed in one of them.
Same time, go ahead.
Okay, okay, tie it closer to him, like it travels faster. I just wanted, I don't know if I made it clear, one of my concerns is not with the people who are complaining, because they will always make themselves known. The ones that are upset or annoyed, they make their voices heard, they know how to do it. What I'm worried about is information bias, which means that when we only hear the complaining people, then we get a distorted, or it's easy to get a distorted opinion about what's happening. What my envisioning is, and maybe there's another way to accomplish this idea of mine, but is to hear a balanced report rather than an unbalanced. Because right now we only get an unbalanced, biased reporting because we only hear from the ones who are motivated to tell us stuff. And in generally, people are not going to go be motivated to call us up and sing praises about the city administrator. We're only going to hear the people that, and so we are all subject to this information bias, where the only information we hear is the negative ones. And it would be nice, I'm looking for balance to say, well, is everybody think a negative opinion on it? Or is this just that one person who's crazy? Or, because, you know, there's 130 people, right, that work for the city, so there's going to be I'm not crazy, but not everybody's going to be satisfied all the time. I know that. But as a council, there's that, and that's why I agree with, it wouldn't be every quarter or nothing, it'd be like once a year or something. So how is the city doing, you know, kind of thing. And so you can get, say, one person's really, really upset with you for whatever reason, but the rest of them are like, nah, it's doing a good job. You know, that would be information I need too, but I will never get that information, but I will always get the information about the one person who thinks you're doing a bad job. And so what that creates in my mind is it's like, you know, never, you know, you don't ever want to talk to the mother-in-law about how the marriage is, because they don't hear the complaints, right? That's why the mother-in-law always hates, you know, hates the daughter-in-law, because the only things you heard about is the complaints, right? And when things are going happy, they don't hear about it. So I don't know if that's
It's an interesting
that's a good.
Very funny analogy.
Yeah. Okay, so, Paul. Sorry, Councilor Waterman.
Yeah, that's okay. So I guess kind of going back to that, if the idea is that we're only going to be talking to the directors specifically about the goals that are specifically in the idea, then you're not going to necessarily hear the things that you're wanting to hear, because you're saying, no, we're just sticking to the schedule. And we're only talking about this. And so if we are going to get feedback about that, I don't understand what additional information we're going to get from people in that manner, and bringing them in, sitting them down, scheduling face-to-face every director over those things. That to me would be more of a feedback form type thing that they would fill out. Did the city manager meet your goals on these things? Yes or no, and some feedback. I don't know if I spend the time to have to parade, like you said, all these people in to sit down and talk about something that you're going to get limited information on. Either you're going to get more information like you're talking about, because otherwise it's a very limited scope of information that you're expecting to get for a lot of effort from me.
Okay, so it's 10 to 9. I'd like to have a hard stop at 9. And so I would like to take a moment and just say, in this particular piece, I have in my notes that I will follow up with Emily and find some legalese interpretation of the whole department head council conversation piece, at least get that angle from it. What else have we solidified or put in motion for moving forward?
We're going to do this forum.
For this time only.
Councilor Patton, and then I need Sally's input on something.
So what I would like to what I would like to advocate for is that, to me, it sounds like as far as setting a process for the future, not this thing, but for the future, this is a pretty good start. It seems like everybody is pretty much on board with the broad details of this, goals, the scoring, the process for the interview, the process for the, most of the steps for the timeline for the review, most of the steps for the goal. It sounds like, to me, this city council interviewing managers of all of these steps is the one lightning rod step. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, it's a third rail.
Okay. But as far as the goal-setting process, that I guess what I'm curious about is what are people's thoughts between option A and option B? The council sitting down and making and baking the goals all as a group, or the council meeting and creating a menu of goals that then the mayor and the council president go work with the city administrator to finalize in what that goals document would be to bring that document back to us for approval. What are people's flavor on that?
I like the second option.
Yeah.
It's more, it allows Eileen to be involved in a more intimate way, and I don't view the process as being good to be like, we are setting our will from on high and directing it down to, because it should be collaborative. I think that will give you the best goals, because together you're going to think about better ways of expressing the goals, and we that come here once a week, or these days everyone's every 2 weeks, would have on the matter.
So I guess what my proposal will be is that perhaps, and Sally, I would appreciate, you can jump in here if you would like. What I will propose is that we take, that this information gets kind of like moved forward with tonight. And essentially create a subcommittee. Considering I'm the one that created all this stuff, would love to be on that subcommittee and maybe work with Sally, and whether it's the council president or the mayor, and we kind of get together and start to flesh out more of these details into a more honed in process based on what was talked about tonight, and then come back with that is what I am proposing.
Yeah, I don't feel like we're done tonight.
Oh, gosh, no.
This is the process beginning. I've
Another 2 hours.
been massaging this whole thing while we've been talking, so I would be fine participating in the conversation going forward.
Jamie, you have a comment?
Just a question. Sally, do you feel like you have enough information that you could work with a subcommittee, work with Jason and a subcommittee to put something together for us?
I think so. I think I just have some kind of overarching interest that I'm not sure about, I'm still, my head's kind of full from a lot of information, but I mean, yeah, I think I could work together and come up with some ideas. I'm not sure how many goals you want that are sort of more like your SMART goals, right? That are
Right.
created, easily tracked, you do from year to year and kind of flexible, and then how many real clear measurable outcomes you want from objectives that are just sort of always there, like you always run the budget, these things are always there and you always want to measure. So I think that's where I'm still a little bit mushy, and I'm still kind of trying to think that through as questions, but that's something we could all talk about.
Yeah. And I do think, too, that the city administrator can help establish what those goals are going to be for herself as well.
That's the menu option.
That's right. It's not always just, well, the sky's blue, we want it to be gray, right? But
It's Oregon.
It's always dry.
it's Portland.
No, it's gray, we want it to be blue.
Good luck.
Yeah, not for the next few days anyway, but,
Yeah.
I think that the self-appraisal side of it is important too. In other words, the city administrator has to work with us to help establish, we've got the overall goals, right, that we've set up, we keep on our sheets and stuff like that. But of those goals, what are we going to accomplish this year? And the city administrator should be able to present something to the city council, and then the city council agrees upon those as far as SMART goals are concerned. But I'm interested in what Jason said in regards to a subcommittee working with Sally, or Sally putting something together and then get together with the subcommittee and the city administrator to put that together too, because it has to work for the city administrator too.
Yeah, and I would say that by no means am I talking about creating what those goals are.
Right.
This is just saying, because what you were saying is, maybe have a section of the document that it says goals, and then a section of the document that's like some other thing. What does that sort of look like? And start to kind of incorporate those things into it and say, well, based on feedback, based on this is kind of what that process would look like, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who really don't feel like evaluations are that helpful for people, unless you're performance managing. A lot of people complain that evaluations really, you get the same thing unless it's kind of subjective. So what you're doing is kind of a dynamic process where you get a lot of feedback. It's just different. And I think that now you just have to build it. That's what you want to do, yeah.
Well, and I think too, the other thing is that because this is such a radical departure, I guess, from what has been done in the last few years, my hope of doing this is that essentially if whatever is born out of this process is a guinea pig, and that guinea pig gets tested and fed carrots and different things, and does it puke or does it die or what does it do? And at the end it's like, hey, that worked, this didn't work, and eventually over the course of a period of time we have a very sturdy guinea pig that future councils can use, and so that if there's a major change in council, they don't like, what the heck did these people do in the past? This is ridiculous, and so now they actually have something to work with.
Just tell them Jason did it.
Yeah. And city administrators.
Throw one more
opinion
idea into it.
and
Another
input is
thing I could do
important.
is I could create a table of kind of interests of what you want, like you want it to not be too difficult, you want it to be measurable, and then you could kind of match those interests up with your different ideas, which might make it easier because this is a lot.
Yeah.
So it's a way to kind of test your plan, is you figure out what your criteria are, and then I can kind of help you map it. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't done one of those for a while. That'd be fun.
Okay.
Okay.
All right,
Just to facilitate a lot.
it is 9 o'clock.
Here's your hard stop.
Eileen, you were about to say something that
Yeah, I want to make sure what.
you
is
can't
the
make motions to adjourn.
I'm not,
You cannot.
I will not.
Oh,
At your
okay.
role, Mayor. What I want to make sure is what is expected from me for next week, because there is an evaluation
Your
or an
self-evaluation.
executive session, so.
Sounds like a
So right now,
updated self-evaluation.
Counselor Stearns, thank you for making it a fillable form. Could you email that out perhaps to the entire council and to me?
Well, he can't, but he can send it to you
Yeah.
and staff can.
He can
Otherwise,
send it
it's
to
a meeting,
Maya,
isn't it?
because we don't want a serial meeting.
Oh, okay.
But he can send it to Maya, and she can
I could
send
do
it
it,
out.
yeah, I
Yeah,
just,
please send it to me
because
tomorrow.
I started filling it out
Yeah.
this week, but I wanted to see your evaluation before it just kind of drafted, so I get my thoughts together on it. But
Okay,
can
I
do
will
that.
get it to you as soon as I
I'll have
create
to-
it.
Yeah, and if I don't give it to you, email me and ask me to give it
I
to
will
you.
do so.
Because I'm
Thank
in
you.
that time of year where I am being, business-wise, being thrown out.
You're probably
Yeah, right.
super stupid. to
Yeah, I got about 20 people that I'm not returning calls to yet that want me to, because as only guy, I can only return calls one at a time.
Okay,
Thank you, thank you.
all right. Sally, thank you for being here.
Thank you,
Emily,
everybody.
thanks for pitch hitting tonight, appreciate it. I'll take a
Move to
motion.
adjourn.
Is there,
Seconded.
moved, seconded, and third, we are adjourned. Good night, Canby, thank you for watching.
I just